K-Drama School. I'm your host, Grace Jung. I am very glad to be finished with Jirisan, which I am going to be talking about today. This is a show that's been out for at least a couple of years now, but I didn't really get into it until like literally last week because I found it on Amazon Prime. Did you know that Amazon Prime has a lot of Korean dramas these days? I didn't know that. I think Amazon Prime is also like claiming some of the K dramas to be an Amazon Prime original, which, as you know, you and I know, I mean, if you're my listener, a long time listener, you all know that Amazon or Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu, they will just put these labels like it's their own original when really they acquired the show and it was produced in Korea and then they just acquired it and they just kind of put their label over it, right? Just means that they have exclusive rights over it. Chirisan is not an Amazon Prime exclusive. It's also found on Viki. But yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. So if you have Amazon Prime, then go check out some of the shows. It is a 2021 TVN Korean drama written by Kim Eun-hee, and it stars Chun Ji-hyun and Chu Ji-hoon, right? And Kim Eun-hee has worked with both of these actors with her previous series, Kingdom, and Chun Ji-hyun is in the prequel film that ended Kingdom, and Chu Ji-hoon is the crown prince, who is in the first two seasons, well, the only two seasons of Kingdom. I think they're gonna work on something else, like a spin-off of Kingdom with Chu Ji-hoon in it. I think I saw something about that floating around. Who knows? But yeah, excellent pairing. I really like both of these actors, like on their own separate accord. You know, Chun Ji-hyun's very beautiful. I'm always like going on about how much I love her comedic timing and her comedic acting ability. And Chu Ji-hoon, as I've all told you, like I found him really unimpressive in that series Princess Hours, but then like years later, now that he's like mature and fleshed out and he's like really hot and he's an excellent actor. So I appreciate both of these actors and I think they have pretty good chemistry on screen on this series, even though it's not like a romantic chemistry throughout. In fact, there's very little suggestion of romance between these two characters for the most part. Yeah, for the most part, it's like kept very professional. And I wonder if that is because Chun Ji-hyun's character is the senior. Yeah, like the female character is the senior and the male character is the junior. So he's like a little bit more, I don't know, careful with how he approaches her. Whereas I felt like if it was the other way around, I think the male character would have been a lot more like aggressive. Like, I mean, I already talked about this, but if you guys haven't seen the show Beautiful Days, yeah, check it out. It is like the most like Me Too worthy series like of all time, because there's this like director who like is into this retail sales clerk and he is so aggressively like not just not kosher. It's like really like unwelcome. Anyway, just check it out. You'll know what I mean. But the show is very much the opposite. A lot of professional decorum, professional respect, blah blah blah. Perhaps I don't know, maybe they don't even end up like together. But actually no, like from what I've seen in the ending of Chirisan, yeah, it's like very much like ending on a romantic potential. That's where it ends. If you're trying to see like a romantic series, this is not the one. Yeah. Chirisan is unique because a lot of television series in both Hollywood and in Korea, they'll focus on like other kinds of, I don't know, heroic careers. Like you have cops, you have firefighters, you have lawyers, and you have, I mean, I think that's about it. But in Chirisan, they're focusing on mountain rangers. And mountain rangers really are unsung heroes in the sense that their work requires a lot of grit and perseverance. It's a dangerous job and it's a dirty job. And yet they're not really the focal point in many shows or movies, right? But it makes sense that these mountain rangers would become the center point of a show because there are plenty of situations that could go wrong in the mountains, right, when people are hiking, and people definitely do die from hiking. So yeah, there's a lot of fodder for this show in terms of conflict, in terms of things that could go wrong, in terms of chaos, in terms of disasters. Kim Eun-hee is a very accomplished writer when it comes to non-linear storytelling, and this is something I felt very much so while watching Chirisan, especially because she's done this with her other shows like Signal. But I think Chirisan is particularly great at unraveling the mystery layer by layer through like engaging storytelling through this sort of dynamic play between the present and past through flashbacks and like present day mystery crime solving, right? And it is also interesting how well Kim Eun-hee can balance the fantastical with the real. Like in all of her shows, pretty much, she always like infuses this element of the fantasy. Like in this case, like in Chirisan, you have the guy who's like in a coma, but his soul is wandering around the mountains, and that soul is, I don't know, sending signals. Yeah. And it's like in that show Signal, you have like a similar kind of situation, but it's like a person in his past who can communicate with the future through a walkie-talkie, right? So you always have like these kinds of fantastical things sort of infused with the realism of a show, like the verisimilitude of a show with like concrete things. It's like, oh, there are people, there are certain conflicts, certain struggles. Like this is all relatable in human terms, but then she'll also like add a layer of like, oh, there's also like ghosts. Oh, there's also time travel. She'll like throw them in there. But I think she does it pretty like, I don't want to say tasteful because that's not quite what I mean. I think she does it in a way that is entertaining. Yeah. She does it in a way that's very, very entertaining. A villain on this show who becomes a villain because of his severe childhood trauma. And then he uses this trauma as an excuse to murder a whole bunch of innocent people in the mountains. And the thing about traumatized people that I'm increasingly learning is that they're very good. Well, I'm also part of it. We're all very good at reading people. I'm not to the point of like reading minds, but there are definitely like psychopaths or people with like severe personality disorders who can read minds. And it's not that they could like literally see into your mind. In some cases, yeah, they can. But it's like there are some who could just read your body language and your eye movement, your facial movement. Like, they could read your aura and your energy, your vibration, and they could just like tell exactly what you're thinking and they could finish your senses. And, like, that's fucking terrifying, right? And my question to that, when people do that to victimize or manipulate people, my question is, why don't you use that skill for good? Like there are plenty of people who get paid to do precisely work like that as mystics, as psychics, as healers. You can go in that direction, or as a therapist, like whatever, a teacher, whatever. There are people who do that. And then there are people who decide to use that for their own evil gain, for their own vindictive purposes. And like, my question is like, why? Like, why you gotta be evil, man? Like, why can't you just be good, you know? So this is just indicating to me that everybody has a choice. Every individual has a choice. Like, are you going to lean into what you've suffered and use that as a reason to, I don't know, like create more shit in the world? Or are you going to lean into that as a gift and as a skill to bring more good and healing and happiness into the world, right? I mean, this is a choice that you can make. My favorite cameo appearance in Jirisan is 손석구, which I'm sure many of you have already guessed if you've seen the show. And you all know that 손석구 is like my guy right now. In terms of the K-drama, like hottie, the person I'm into, like 손석구 is like up there. I love him. And I literally gasped when his face popped up on the screen, like as this special cameo appearance, because I was not expecting it. Not in the least. And I think this is just like a gift from the universe telling me that yeah, like, Disney Plus fucked you over by promising plenty of Sonsaku by, falsely advertising that he's like one of the primary leads of that horrible show Casino. But he was not. It was a full-on lie. He didn't show up until like the very, very end. And so that whole show was like a big fat waste of my fucking time. But like on this series in Chirisan, when I was least expecting him, he like shows up and he's playing like a romantic kind of role, you know, like kind of like this flirtatious like tension, like love tension, sexual tension between him and Yigang on the show, played by Chun Jian. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was not expecting that. So it was like this awesome cameo appearance, you know, it like really made up for it. And the other thing I noted, and this is something I've always like noted in my mind silently to myself, but like Chunjian has such a beautiful voice. She has a very pleasant sounding voice that I could like just keep listening to. And I think that's another testament to her, I don't know, performance ability, to a testament to her destiny as an actor. Yeah. She has like such a pleasant sounding voice. I could just like listen to her all day. And I think that's why, like, because she's almost like delivering her lines in like a whisper, it's it's the contrast when she starts like amping it up and she starts like yelling a lot on a show or in a film, like when she's like playing up a character. I think it becomes funnier because her voice is usually so whispery and low. That contrast, you know, definitely heightens the comedic impact for sure. One major issue I have with Chiri-san is that, okay, like on the one hand you have Chun Jian's character who is like wheelchair bound. She's a person with a disability, and I'm like, okay, great. Like we have a hero who has a disability. That's great. But then, like in the end, suddenly out of nowhere, with no like what, no explanation whatsoever, she's suddenly walking, and that moment is romanticized in the mise en scène. You know, like her feet come out first from the car, and when she stands up, it's like the music comes in and it's like, oh, like this awesome moment. It's like, oh, the hero got her legs back. But I'm like, how? Like she was in a wheelchair for what it seemed like at least a couple years, or no, is that wrong? In any case, I'm like, she was in a wheelchair, which is to say that she lost the use of her legs. And um what's wrong with that, you know? Like, I mean, the expectation of a cure of a disability is always lingering, or like that's the destination point in all K-dramas that feature disabilities, which is a lot of K-dramas. Many K-dramas have disabilities in them, and throughout most of them it's like, oh, the expectation is, oh, they're going to be cured of this, and the cure and the healing of it is going to be the ending. And it's like, well, why does that have to be the case? I mean, there are plenty of people who live with a disability like their whole entire lives, and they still lead a fulfilling and satisfying life. But I'm sure those people would appreciate a character who is living with a disability all throughout. And if she is no longer a person with a disability, if she is now a person who is recovered, then it's like, well, what were the steps to that recovery? Like, why is that not shown at all? Why is it just like randomly thrown in? Like, oh, she can walk. Did she see Jesus? You know, like in the previous episode that they cut out. What's going on, right? Today's guest is illustrator and author Deb J.J. Lee, whose book In Limbo was published last month by First Second Books, and it is a beautifully illustrated book that explores growing pains and joys of a kid who is transitioning from middle school into high school, while also navigating cultural differences, identity questions, child abuse, grades, creative expression, and friendships. And it's a wonderful book that I think everybody should read on their tablets while having lunch at the Cheesecake Factory, which is exactly what I did. So let's talk to my guest, Deb J.J. Lee. What's the cat's name?
Here she is. Marley.
Hi,
Wait, hang on. But
Marley.
like
Oh, what a pretty
she's
cat.
she's really pretty. I actually adopted her from this old lady who like passed away. And I think like her name's supposed to
Oh,
stand for Marlene.
mm-hmm.
Like but I like to think that her name stands for Marlboro, like the cigarette company.
Yeah,
So I like
way
to
better.
imagine her yeah. I like to imagine her as like a chain smoking cat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gotta have the badassness. Yeah.
In the family, no, she is more badass than me. But she only has 3 teeth left.
Oh, she's an older cat.
No, she's not. You know, she came with 4 teeth when she was like 3. But I think
Oh,
like when she was a kitten, like her gums were like rotting or something. So they had to like pull
oh,
out all her teeth and then in January, like the infection spread or something spread, and now like they pulled out one of her teeth, and now she has three left. But they found like pus underneath the
Uh,
tooth, so she was like in a lot of pain. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, like
yeah.
that explains a lot, actually. Sorry, I'm gonna sneeze. Never mind. But yeah, how where are you located?
I'm in LA.
Oh!
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, so it's like super early for you.
a little, but it's okay. Gives me an
Do you
excuse to wake up early.
Sure, do you have like do you work a full-time job?
No, I'm a writer, so I do
Cool.
that, and I'm a stand-up comic, so I do that. So my
Cool.
hours are my own, but
Nice.
yeah. So like I usually wake up at like 10, but I'm like, well,
Same.
sometimes it's better to wake up earlier in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find, I mean, like also as like a freelancer myself, do you find that um do you find that like you're not only your own boss, but like you also feel like your own shitty unpaid intern?
Of course,
Yeah, no
absolutely.
one really talks about being the intern of
There's
your
so many
own
things that
job.
I wish I could just like assign to an assistant, and
Yeah.
but no, I have to do them all by myself.
Yeah, right. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like you have no one to blame but you if like something goes wrong. It's like, well, I guess it's my
100%.
fault.
100%. But, it's like all those
Yeah.
shitty internships that I've done, like, they've paid off in a way because now I know how to do them, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I just know how to
Right,
do
exactly.
the grunt work, which is a key foundation in any company, like, you need the administrative basis. So,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining me for this chat. I really loved your book. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. How where did you hear about it? I'm just curious.
I'm friends with another, illustrator, and she's an author. Her name's Kat Min, and she's a Korean American children's book author, and,
Okay.
yeah, we've been friends since high school, and,
Oh.
yeah, she and I are working on a film together at the moment, so, like, we just, like, talk regularly and recommend works to each other, and she was like, "Oh, I got this book, and it's really good, and I think you'd enjoy it," so she recommended it to me, and I don't read graphic novels often, but,
Mhm.
like, the ones that I follow, like, Mari Naomi, like, I really love her work, and,
Mhm.
yeah, so I was like, "Okay, let's check it out." So I went to the Cheesecake Factory that day. It was, like, my artist date,
Good.
and I read the whole book at the bar at the Cheesecake Factory. I loved your book. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. I mean, that is the only way it should be read,
Yeah,
at
at the
the
Cheesecake
Cheesecake
Factory,
Factory.
at the
I
bar.
mean, was the
Yeah.
book was the menu as thick as the book? Probably.
I actually
It's
read
a
your book
brick.
on my tablet,
Oh,
and,
nice.
I'm like, "Oh, like, the tablet is the perfect way to read a graphic novel actually because it's, like,
I mean, yeah, it's like a webtoon.
compact." Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I was like, "This is perfect." Like, I could just sit here, I could just swipe with my fingers, I could read it clearly. I was like, "This is the greatest way to read." So I'm gonna read more graphic novels, if anything, like
nice. Good choice. Yeah, I mean, I can also recommend you some that,
Please,
really affected me.
please, please. That was gonna be one of my
Yeah.
questions anyway, to ask you about your influences. But yeah, what are you reading
Oh,
these days that's
perfect.
exciting you?
Oh, man. Well, I'm rereading Grass,
Hmm,
which is a oh man, who's the author? I need to figure this out.
it's
Grass,
alright.
drawn in quarterly. No, it's okay. Um, I hear the click clack. It is by. It's about like comfort women in Korea, but
Oh, fascinating.
it's like a biography. So
Oh,
it's legit. Like it's by a person. It's written by a person who is recounting a former comfort woman from the Japanese occupation.
got it.
But let's see. Yeah, the name is Kumseok Gendry Kim.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, but it's called
Uh
Grass.
I'm glad that a Korean American person wrote it.
Oh no, I
Um,
mean it was no, it's written so it was actually translated. So it was a
got
Korean
it. Got it. That's
written
even better,
for,
actually.
yeah, yeah. So it's a Korean person, a Korean um graphic novelist who wrote about a different Korean like woman who was a comfort woman, and it was translated not too long ago by
Oh,
Drawn and Quarterly. So
yeah.
now it's in our hands now, and
Perfect.
it's so heartbreaking. It's like, because we don't really, I mean, like, I don't really hear much about comfort women, but like when you hear about like the way that they were treated, and you just, I don't know, there's something with like me and like watching like Korean people suffer, like especially older Korean people suffer,
Oh,
that
yeah.
like it just like hurts a lot. So
Devastating.
I couldn't
Yeah.
even, yeah. I mean, it's a thick book, but I couldn't get through like 20 pages without like putting it down and just like,
Sobbing.
oh, breathe. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like, damn, like we don't really hear about like, I don't know. I feel like the whole model minority thing, just like we don't really hear about the like Koreans that are, like they're just like middle class people. You know what I do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
only hear about like Koreans who are like doctors, or like Asians who are like doctors and stuff, and like
The
we don't really
success
hear about like,
stories.
yeah, but
Uh-huh.
the we only hear about the success stories, but like what is it? Something something the wealth gap between
Mhm.
the poorest
Mhm.
and the richest Asian Americans is like the highest
Mhm.
among most demographics in
Mhm.
America,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is
And the model minority
tragic.
myth is, used by right-wing media to justify uh, America and American democracy and capitalism as a
Yeah.
system that works 100% of the time. And it's also used to, um, disparage the Black and Brown communities
Mhm.
for systemic failures, but it's like used to blame them. And
Yeah.
I hate that we're used as literal poster children, just as we have been used
You're right.
since the Korean War. Like we were literally used as poster children by Americans to justify that America's not a racist country, while there were civil rights movements happening all across the country in the 50s, right? So
Right.
yeah, it has a deep history of that. And actually, that goes to the heart of what I want to talk to you about your book and the reason why it
For sure.
resonated so much with me when I was reading it, because you talk about all of the things that I wish somebody had talked about when I was in middle school, like
Interesting.
when I was in high school. Um 'Cause, the opening is basically, like, about, this young girl who feels insecure about the way she looks, right? And
Mhm.
it's very specific, it's her eyes, right? And
Mhm.
this is, like, the whole thing about, like, Sangapur is this cultural thing that a lot of, Korean kids know about and talk about, and it's, like, part of the culture, really, but it's so foreign to non-Koreans, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I remember, even when I was a kid, just, like, hearing about it, seeing other kids who got it, like, they would go to Korea, they would come back, and they would look different. It was, like, a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, but, yeah, like, what made you wanna start the book out with that particular insecurity with this character, Deb?
Yeah, I mean, it was always something that I measured about myself. Like I would do like crazy things, like what is the proportion between like, what is the ratio between like the size of my eyes to like how many of my eyes sizes does it take to get up to my eyebrows? And it's like,
Ah.
oh, I mean, even like I mean, like among most of my classmates, which were predominantly white, it's like, oh my gosh, like my proportions are like so not what it should quote should be.
Mm.
But also like I remember being with like other Koreans, and they're like, yeah, your eyes are like small even for an Asian person. And like I
Mm.
just had like a lot. I mean, I had like a ton of fat, like because that's what monolids are. Like I had a ton
Yeah.
of fat between in that area,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize it at the time, but like there was so much fat up there that it actually affected my like it actually went over my iris, like my pupil a little bit.
Uh,
So it was actually like and I hate to say this, but like it was hard to see. I
mm,
didn't realize it, but like hard to open my eyes until like I would, start like putting like Elmer's glue over my eyelids and like folding it up that way.
hmm,
Then I'm like, oh my gosh, like this this makes sense now. Like I get it. I mean, obviously, you can't miss what you never had until I started doing that. But I
mm,
don't know. I mean, I think it's also chronological, perhaps, that
mhm,
at the very beginning, I remember. I mean, this is like an alternate version of the
mhm,
intro, which is my brother and me at the beach.
mhm,
But I was with like a friend and my brother, and she's white. We went to
mhm,
the beach, and like I remember like looking at like her eyes and then looking at my brother's and I was like, wow, like the shape of like her bone structure the shape of
yeah,
her bone structure is like is not even just eyes. It's like the way that they're set and it's the way
yeah,
that they're like everything. And then I looked at my brother's eyes and then I'm like, those are the eyes that I have.
uh-huh,
And there's like I mean I like sorry, Brad, but like that's like in my own um naive way, I was like, they're so empty. Like there's
yeah,
nothing there.
uh,
And I think that's when I really started like focusing on that stuff. So it
huh,
was like it was pretty chronological. I also wanted to like the process of the book. Like I think the beginning of the book was meant to be very like it's very I don't know, one might say cliche forms of diaspora, like, oh, I don't really fit in here, but I don't fit in there.
mm,
I don't I like the very surface level stuff about like what it means to look different.
mhm,
Like, and I think that's the intro of it.
mhm,
And then over the book, you kind of get into more complex topics. Like,
mhm, yeah,
um, it starts to become less and less about like a quote immigrant story and more
yeah,
about like, well, this is what it's like to grow up.
mhm,
Um, but it just happens to be from the lens of me.
yeah, a Korean American,
And I
yeah,
think, yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, it's supposed to start there and like kind of go deep. And then later it kind of becomes like this whole I'm back in Korea, like
mhm,
this is weird. Um,
mhm,
so yeah, I mean I
yeah,
don't know, I think that's kind of what it is.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's important actually because the whole like monolid insecurity thing. Well, first of all, like monolids are the trend nowadays. Like you have actresses
Yeah.
like Park So-dam and Kim Go-eun who are really like
Yeah.
popular in Korean cinema and in K-dramas. And it's like, I mean, they're getting recognized as, like, beautiful actresses, beautiful women. And when I was growing up in the '90s and
Mhm.
early 2000s, that was not the case, you know? It
No.
was, like, all Eurocentric features. That's all we ever saw. Um,
Mhm.
like, even at the time, like, we didn't really have, like, Asian models, you know? Like, we had
Oh,
Asian
no.
models who were, like, half black or half white, but we didn't
Mhm.
have Asian models who had monolids or, you know, like, that was not at all cherished as a beauty standard. And so,
Yeah.
like, it's understandable, like, oh, for this young girl who's, you know, at like the peak of her adolescent, right? Like her
Mhm.
adolescent period, like about to enter high school, which is such a frightening and insecure period anyway. It's like
Right.
to not have those standards in the culture, in the zeitgeist, and to feel an insecurity, which is like what all high school kids feel anyway, to be like, oh, do I
Right.
look weird? Like every high school has that insecurity, like, oh, I have a flaw, or I'm not perfect, or you know, there's something. And it's like such a shameful secret thing that they keep to themselves. But you know, you present it in this book, it's like, oh, it's out, it's not a secret, you know, like it's here, right? And I think that does do something that offers some kind of processing for a lot of people.
Wait, what do you mean what's here?
Like it's in the book. The whole like
Oh.
the Sangapur thing is in the
Oh,
book.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah,
So
no, I it's
yeah.
I I mean, it's something I used to be very secretive about,
Mhm.
until I, like, just it's really nothing to be ashamed about. It's like
Yeah.
it's just a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
like plastic surgery, I mean, there's also like gender affirming surgery, which like I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's a whole other thing. But
Mhm.
I kind of just want to put it out there. Like I just want to show that like I have nothing to hide, and
Yeah.
like all my mistakes, like all my worst mistakes, which like are in that book, is just
Yeah.
like that's just what it is. And then like I try my best, and that's like what it is. It's like not just a sankapur, but it's also the like everything else that I was like I used to be ashamed about, that it's like, well, no, like how can I how can you push me down when I've already pushed myself down in front of everybody
Uh,
in a way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I wanna get to that too, like, I'll work incrementally because I was, like, writing these
Sure.
questions down as I was sorta, like, revisiting your book and, um, like, the whole first day of class thing and the name thing, like,
Mhm.
I wanna ask you, did you ever legally change your name to Deb?
No.
Okay,
No, it's still Junction.
okay, so that's like, first of all, Jeongjin is not that difficult of a name. Like,
I
Jeongjin
know,
is
it's
very
so
easy to
easy.
pronounce. Yeah, so
It's
my Korean name is Hyunju, and that was my
yeah.
legal name for the longest time. Hyun is impossible for Americans to ever fucking pronounce. They can't do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hyun.
So, I had all different kinds of, like, hallucinated pronunciations of that name throughout my whole
Wow.
life, and I was just like when I was reading that part in your book, like, I felt my body sweating. I like,
Oh, no. It's
I felt
yeah.
your character. I was like, "I know exactly what this feels like."
It's a very visceral feeling. Do you know Messy Roots by Laura Gao?
I don't.
Okay, so Laura is this is a memoir that Laura released. It's also a graphic novel
Mm,
last year, but Laura is from Wuhan, so hers was more
mm,
about like it was like very timely with like COVID and everything.
sure.
But the way that Laura wrote out the exact like the exact delivery of like how her name was mispronounced like
Mm,
before it was Laura,
mhm.
um it was it's like, oh, it was the exact same way that I
Ugh,
delivered mine. So it's like it's a very
yeah.
visceral feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny, like I wish I had like the knowledge of saying this earlier, but like I like to say now that like, oh, it's Jungjin, it like sounds like jungle gym, or
Mm.
like one of my a friend of mine like to joke that it was like Jungjin and Dragons.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could like say that and be like, yeah, I mean, think like Dungeon and Dragons, it's like Jungjin and Dragons.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
'Cause
yeah, I wish I knew that back then. That would have been really funny.
'Cause now you have the capacity, like, the emotional
Yeah.
sort of capacity and space to approach it with a sense of humor and lightness and
Mhm.
and a willingness to be accommodating, right?
Yeah.
But, for, like, a young girl, like, 13-year-old girl, like, that's a big ask, I think, especially when she's dealing with so many insecurities anyway, because of her
Yeah.
age and because of her environment, which is very microaggressive, like, it's not just the name thing, right? It's also, teachers, like, mistaking Deb for another Asian girl, like, that's
Yeah, dude.
also so common, like, we've all
It was
experienced
not,
it.
and it was just like it wasn't even just like the names. I mean, in the book, it this happened frequently, but like when that specific teacher would give us our like tests or essays back, I would look at it and be like, is he actually giving me mine, or is he giving me that other Korean girl's?
Yeah.
Like that would happen, and I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
well, it's hers, so we got to do the
Yeah.
switch.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like sometimes like I think we did this like during class. I would be like, hey, you gave me hers instead, and everyone would be like, holy fucking shit,
Ah.
like not
Good.
again.
Good for you. I'm glad you guys did that because,
Yeah,
no,
and he'd
like
be like, oh my god, I'm so sorry.
sometimes that affects grades. Like, I remember in college, I was at Hunter College for, like, a year, and
Oh yeah, Hunter.
there was, like, an adjunct, like, a white woman adjunct in an English class, and she would confuse me with another Asian girl who would never show
Okay.
up to class. And so she thought I was cutting class, which I wasn't. And, like, and I was like, "Oh my god, like, this problem it's fucking up our grades. It's not just, because she would do the same thing. She would hand me that girl's papers, and it would be like a fucking 40, you know. And I'm like, like I know I did the work, and she would be like, oh, and then she wouldn't even fucking apologize. She would just hand me my paper, but I'm like, this bitch thinks I'm the fuck up in class when I'm not.
Oh
Like the fuck up Asian
no.
girl is not me. So it was impacting my grades because she would just think like, "Oh, she's not showing up to class." But there's really no way to prove that and be like,
Right.
You're being a racist bitch and you forgot like you keep thinking I'm her and I'm not." So, there's no way you could go back in time. Like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think it's a much bigger problem than just like an annoying thing, right? It's
Yeah, it's also
actually Mhm.
it also
Yeah,
tells me that, like, you're not even bothering to try, like, you're not even bothering to get to know us, as individuals, like,
exactly.
you see us as, like, part of, like, a crowd. I mean, this
Exactly.
is how I felt in, like, college. There's this one professor who, I mean, I'm not really sure what her deal is, or was. Like, she would send the wrong email to, like, the wrong Korean dude, or, like, send, like, the
Oh
wrong,
god.
and, like, do that, but also she would confuse the blondes in her class. So
Oh.
it's like, are you just face blind? Like,
I
I'm
think
not
she might
like,
be
how do
face
we
blind. That's a real
that I
thing.
know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's like even with names, it's like when you're sending emails, it's like,
Yeah, that's a
hmm.
little much.
Um, but yeah, I don't know what her deal is, but it's like, I don't know. I mean, there were so many Asians in my class, and there continues to be more and more Koreans in and like as the years go by, I noticed that the Korean population and like those that program has been getting higher and higher.
Did you
But
really
it's
go to Carnegie Mellon?
I did. I went to the School
There
of
are
Design.
a lot of Koreans at Carnegie Mellon, that I know.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
half the
Oh
kids
yeah.
that I grew up with, they all went to Carnegie Mellon.
Oh god. Oh boy. Um,
It was Carnegie
are you from
Mellon
the
or
Bay
Rutgers.
Are you from the Bay Area?
I'm actually from New York. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
that makes
actually from New
sense, yeah.
York. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think, yeah, they said, like, the highest, population from CMU is either, like, California, um, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and then New York or something, like,
Makes
which
sense.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, that's really funny. What was I gonna say? Yeah, no, there are a lot of Koreans, and I feel like sometimes I wonder if my professors, like, some of my professors, like, purposefully only talk to like the white kids in her class, or like the white
Huh.
girls in her class, because I mean,
Oh.
they were like white women professors, and it's like you can really get along with the people that you know well. But
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of
Yeah.
like shows that, okay, well, they're not doing great. That's not great. Also, like, you need to like have more representation in your faculty. You know what I mean? It was a bit like that.
Yes, yes, and that
So
that
you're not
really
really, yeah.
shows that privilege is real, like,
Hmm.
because, like, I mean, it's like just nowadays, like, white people are starting to feel the discomfort of what it means to be accommodating towards others. Whereas, like, before, it was just like we all had to assimilate to meet their standards or their needs
Hmm.
or their expectations constantly and
Yeah.
tiptoe around their comfort levels. I remember, like, that was, like, a constant thing. Even from my parents, they were like, "Oh, like, you shouldn't speak Korean when white people are around because they get upset." And I'm like, "Well,
Uh,
fuck them," you know? Like, I
yeah.
remember I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but, like, white kids, especially girls, like, complaining about how, like, their nail salon people would like, if it's a Korean nail salon person, like, they talk in Korean and how that would upset them. Like, white girls complained about that constantly around me for some reason, even though I'm not a nail
Weird.
salon worker, nobody in my family's a nail salon worker, but they would always complain about that to me to my face,
That's so weird.
as if I'm their fucking boss who would put an end to that.
Don't you know that there's, like, only one Asian person in the whole world, and, like, if you tell one Asian person, everyone actually hears it. So,
We
they
put it
thought,
all in a
yeah.
spreadsheet and we inform all of us. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
mean, we
thing.
gotta inform the Asian population this problem. This
Of
is
your
yeah,
grievances.
you should.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, don't you know that if you know one Asian, you know all of them?
You know all of us. Just
You
one
know
if you
all of
know
us.
one, like, Indian person, you know all the whole entire Asian continent.
Yeah,
Like,
no, exactly.
but I do see, like, small forms of, like, kind of an activist mentality behind your work, like, how
Really?
you Yeah, like how you choose Korean words in the book, how you put Hangul in the book, with
Yeah.
no asterisks. You don't have an explanation or translation for every single thing that you write. It's just there. And if you can read
Mhm.
Korean, great, you get it. And if you can't read it, then the option for you to go and learn Hangul is there. And I'm just wondering, like, how did you come to make this choice?
Yeah, it was also, I mean, there are like a few things to it. The first thing is that I also felt weird about translating it too. Like
Yeah.
the second thing is that it was also like a logistics problem. Like I just don't really want to add more text like
Uh,
asterisks. Like
sure.
it also feels like my full intention going into that whole problem or that
Yeah.
situation was more of I want you to know what it was like for me, where I can understand, like, as the character, as younger version of me goes into like Korea, like there's more and more Korean, and then I want you to have the feeling of I can only stand one bits and piece of word at a time,
Mhm.
like, but the Korean is there. I didn't want to draw like squiggles or anything. I
Ah.
want, like, it's there.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm not going to translate it for you. If you get it, like that's a golden ticket for you. But like if you don't get it, I mean, it's fine. It's not going to take away from the story. So that's how I
Sure.
like chose like which Korean words to put in and like what English words to put next to that. It's like you,
Yeah.
even without reading the Korean, you can still get what's going on.
Mhm.
But I didn't, it's like I'm not going to do that. It was more of like I don't want to do that for you. Like I don't think
Yeah.
if you don't get if you, yeah,
Yeah. And that's
that's
what I
something like
mean.
yeah.
That's what I mean by it's like a small form of it's a radical choice. It is
Thank you.
genuinely. And I was like, "Oh, that's superb. I love that choice." Because
Thank
like
you.
even books like Lolita by Nabokov, for instance, like he includes so many like so much French in there. Sometimes he'll like, use like German or Russian or whatever. And it's like
Sure.
and he doesn't add any translations, like he just
Yeah.
assumes that the literary person reading this book is like, you know, multilingual and they're all Eurocentric, languages. So I'm like,
Sure.
so when I see that in a book written by a Korean American person, I'm just like, oh, I love this. And yeah, do this, like own it, do it because
I didn't think Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
it's
Like I think they do
major.
that.
It's
They think they do
major.
that in Jane Eyre as well. Like there's like a lot of French,
Mhm.
but like they don't
Or
translate it here.
Latin or it's just like it's an assumption. It's an assumption that the person reading this is a WASP who comes from a privileged education background. And, so I'm just like, "Oh, yeah," like, for me, what that tells me is, like, as a creator, we can make any choice we want to express ourselves however we please, and I was like, "Oh, I love that decision." Um, I also wanna talk about, like and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier
Mhm.
about, like, the model minority myth versus, like, the
Yes.
actual nitty-gritty in reality. So, your book does explore child abuse. And, I'm a survivor of extreme, physical abuse from my parents growing up, but also from,
Mhm.
like, the Korean church community,
Oh
parents
boy.
yeah, parents of friends. I think, like, Koreans of that generation, like, of, like, the generation from, like, the '50s and '60s and '70s, I think they find it so easy to talk to children in, like, brutalizing ways, like, making really insensitive comments and not understanding what the consequence of those comments might be, especially about like our weight or our looks or our
Mhm.
grades or the most violent one that I've noticed in your book is like comparing, you know, a child to another kid and be like, well, why
Mhm.
can't you be like them? So,
Yeah.
yeah, like in the journey to putting these instances in your book, I was wondering like what the process for you was like mentally and emotionally because I doubt that it came easily to include these kinds of traumas in your book without feeling conflicted about it at any point because they stem from your own personal life. So I was just wondering like what that process was like for you.
I think the most painful process was the like oh, you and this person don't look alike at all, like, because we were getting confused all the time. So it wasn't from
Mhm.
my parents, that was, like, from, like, other friends, I think.
Mm.
Like, "Oh, you and this person look so different, like, she's, like, born to be a model." Like, stuff like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, what does that mean?" I mean,
Yeah.
truth be told, the other comparisons that I, like, I guess are from my parents are more like, I mean, I never really felt, I think even when that happened, I don't think I felt a lot of pain from that because I know that that was not what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
Like, for
Yeah.
example, the violin, I knew I
Yeah.
didn't, I mean, I felt bad because not because my parents told me to feel bad, but because I felt like I was letting other people down.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that was like one thing, but like I'm pretty much over, I feel pretty over that because I know that violin is not for me.
Mhm.
Um, what else? I think there was like one that you that was in the book about like, oh, you're the dentist's kid is like going
Yeah.
to Yale or
Mhm.
something. I mean,
Mhm.
that one I kind of like made up on the fly. Like, I mean, I've heard that so many times. It's like,
Yeah.
well, do those kids even exist? Like, I don't know. Is there one person that is
Yeah.
going to Yale?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I feel like that is such a, I mean, like my cousin is like, he's like a physics, he was like a physics genius or something. Like now
Okay.
he's like, in Korea, like allegedly he's like the top 0.01% of like the students in South Korea, which is like kind of nutso if you think
Okay.
about it.
Okay.
And I'm like, great, like great for him. Like, I mean, even when my mom was telling me this at the time, I was like, okay, well now that's just ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
I like to aim high, but not like that. Like I don't need to be in the top 0.01% of the kids in Korea. Like I don't need to be a doctor because that's what he wanted to be. Like I did not
Sure.
care.
Sure.
Um Largely a lot of the trauma that I talked about in the book is pretty processed.
Yeah. Of
Like
course.
as I don't know, as processed as like Lunchables, I guess. But like
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that. But like it's pretty processed. Like I think like going to a bunch of therapists over time and just like repeating, like spitting out the same like narrative
Mhm.
over and over again
Mhm.
just made me feel like very okay with it.
Mhm.
Like drawing out the, like basically my mom basically attempting, like I struggled to find peace at like describing like this, but like the therapists I do talk to are like, no, that's legit, that was it, it was like a murder suicide attempt, like she was going
Mhm.
through the actions
Yeah.
of that. And that
Yeah.
was the most traumatic event for me, like growing
Mhm.
up, like ever.
Mhm. Yeah.
um but like I talked about it and I drew about it so many times that like it's like it just happened, like,
Yeah.
Lamau, like, LMAO, guys, like, and then
Yeah.
just, like, saying that, like, casually, I mean, it feels very casual at this point, and but, like, it's casual for not many people at all, like, very few people find it
Yeah.
casual.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, okay, so I guess then you don't feel like when you were putting that part in the book, you didn't feel any like conflict about it at that point, I suppose. What about
no,
like
there was very little conflict.
when you were first sort of expressing it? Like was there any sort of um like, "Oh, like, is this okay?" 'Cause, the only reason why I ask, I guess I should open up about why I ask.
Sure, sure, sure.
'Cause I also talk about, like, physical assault growing up with my parents in my book,
Mhm.
like, a book I'm working on, and,
Cool.
like, writing that, like, I do feel conflicted. 'Cause I'm like, "Well, I don't want people to" and there's a point in your book too where you describe it, like, remember when Deb goes to the movies with Quinn and
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh, but what if the monster's like,"
Oh, I think
and
he
she
means
wants to
Kate.
say oh, with Kate, sorry, and
It
it's
was
like
Kate, yeah.
she wants to talk about, like, her abuse at home, but she can't,
Mhm.
like, Deb can't quite say it, you know? Like, there's, like, a
Yeah.
hesitancy, and I'm like, "Oh, I understand what that hesitancy is like," because it feels a little bit like a child trying to talk about how their caretaker is abusive. There's a conflict that occurs.
Mhm.
Like you at the one hand, the child wants to protect their parents' reputation. On the other hand, the child wants to describe what they're suffering, like the reality of their experiences, which is that they're
Correct.
being hurt. So there's this conflict that is taking place, and I'm wondering, like, when you were first drawing this out or first writing about it or first expressing it out onto the page, did you experience any sort of conflict or any kind of like messy feelings or thought processes? And how did you get to a point where you could write it down and have a sense of peace with it? I guess that's my question.
I think just like talking about all the like the beatings and everything.
Mhm. Mhm. In therapy?
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, it's kind of I mean, so my parents already know that I was writing everything about this,
Mhm.
and like I told them beforehand, like, "Hey, mom, like this is everything that I'm gonna write about." And my mom was like,
Mm.
"Yeah, yeah, yeah, it's fine. Just make me look pretty. It's okay." La 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 la. la. I don't know. I think I knew that like I don't know. I have a sort of distance from my parents, like even now, of like
Yeah.
I don't really care. I mean, I care what they think, but like I don't care that much.
Yeah.
Or do I? I don't know. Who
Yeah.
do I care about my yeah, like for me it's like a it feels like a slap on the it feels like ripping the band-aid off. You
Uh,
know? Like it's like how I do like when I get tattoos and stuff. I'm like,
yeah.
"Yeah, I got a tattoo of a noodle dog, can't do anything about it. Bye." And then,
Yeah.
I don't really ask permission anymore. I just do it.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thankful that my parents are like, "Yeah, I mean, we're not like that happy with this, but like we're happy you're making a book." And
Yeah.
uh yeah, which is huge. It's your life. Like, I mean, I can't like this is what happened to you, and that is the consequence of our actions, I guess.
Yeah.
Um my mom still hasn't read the book, but I honestly don't expect her to. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay,
Like I'm not upset by it.
that's great.
My my
I
dad
think
has though.
Oh, yeah? What does he think?
Yeah. I mean, he was like I think he told me that he was quite impressed with the book. I mean, it's a
Mm.
little uncomfortable for him. Like, I mean, that's what he said, but he did read it a couple times and
Yeah.
he was like,
Yeah.
"Wow, like that was uncomfortable, but like you did a great job." I mean, that's the way that he like is.
Okay.
He's very
Yeah.
like, I mean, I don't love this, but like I'm really happy that it was this. It's kind of like
He's
it's how
supportive.
he's
Yeah.
supportive.
Yeah.
But it's like how he just described my first tattoo, which is this one.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
he was like my mom hated the tattoo, obviously, but
Yeah.
my dad was like, "Oh, I mean, like I liked your skin the way it was before, but like that's a nice tattoo." He was like, "I know, I hate it, but like that, I'm glad you got that one." And then,
Yeah.
much to
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
much to his slight disappointment, I got like
Yeah.
many more. So
Good. Good for you. So,
yeah,
okay, then that's great. So it does, I guess, like it does kind of come with the peace that you've made with your parents too. Like you kind of
yeah,
sought their in a way you kind of sought their consent. Not like if they didn't consent, you wouldn't do it. It's more just like letting them know, like, oh, this is going to be in the book. And maybe that helps with the conflict part. But okay, I really loved how much, support Deb has actually in the book, like, because, like, yeah, on the one hand, she's suffering all this inner grief and turmoil, but there are these,
mhm.
like, angels around her too, like her violin teacher, for instance, who encourages
Yeah,
her to pursue her art, and the anecdote he shares about his former student who became a lawyer, but who made that elephant painting, and I thought that's such an angelic moment, right? And I think Quinn was also, like, an angelic influence on Deborah because Quinn
yeah,
is, like, such a bright personality, who
mhm.
helps her overcome her shame around her Korean identity in a way. So, yeah, like, talk about the angel influences in your book a little bit.
I really love the way you described that. Yeah, I mean, that was one. So there are like most of the characters of that book are like generic versions of like other people that I know.
Mhm.
So the only people that I put in like t- likeness, same likeness, same name, mostly the same name, or like is like those are like my parents, my brother,
Mhm.
Kate, and the
Mhm.
violin teacher.
Mm.
Um, partially because I mean, I didn't feel bad about like covering. I could have used his real identity if I wanted, but like it's like he didn't do anything wrong. He was the
Mm,
first person that my parents listened to who was like, oh, okay, this person that we really respect thinks
mm,
that Deb should do art instead.
mm,
And they're like,
mhm.
you know what? Maybe we can try this out. Like, let's. I mean, because before they got the approval of like this person that they like respected, they were like,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, can you really survive on being an illustrator? The
Yeah.
answer is not really. I mean, they're
Yeah.
right, but I mean, they're not wrong. But that's not the illustrator's fault.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the first person that they were like, oh my gosh, like Deb can actually do this if they
Uh-huh.
wanted. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that was really nice of Harry. His yeah,
Yeah.
or as his name was in the book, I believe.
Yeah.
I get that confused. Quinn is interest. I think Quinn is a really interesting character to dissect.
Yeah.
Quinn is actually two people.
Mm.
Um, IRL. Quinn. There's a version of Quinn, um, whose name is Shirley, who
Mhm.
has the appearance of Quinn.
Mm.
Like blonde, curly hair, also like a goddamn genius. She was one of
Mm.
those people like in our school. Like you barely studied for the SATs and yet you got a full score.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
on, dude.
For sure. Yeah. They
Yeah, so
exist.
she was one of they exist. I mean,
Things come
it's
with
funny.
ease.
It's interesting. Okay, this is like a bit of a tangent, but like I always feel like those people who are so smart, who are
Yeah.
like way smarter than like they need to be,
Uh.
end up like doing things that like they want to and not because society tells them to.
Uh-huh.
So,
Mhm.
like becoming a farmer instead, or like running a coffee shop,
Yep.
or like I don't know, like doing all these things that like when people expect you to cure cancer, they're like, I don't want to do that. Like I
Yeah.
want to like travel the world and like teach English or something.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and that's actually Shirley's thing is linguistics now, but everyone expected her to cure cancer because she was
Yeah.
like that smart, but she didn't want to do that.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
off, yeah. So, and the other part of Quinn that is
Uh-huh.
the drama, I like to call them the drama Quinn,
Oh.
um, is a closeted gay boy in my
Mm.
school.
Mhm.
Um, so that is the Quinn where all the drama, all the
Uh-huh.
conflict went down.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Drama Quinn, like Drama Quinn was yeah, like he was the person that like made me feel like I have nothing to be ashamed about who I am. Like he was the person that everyone was friends with, like anyone could talk to him. He could talk
Yeah.
to anybody. But he still had like his like reservations about, like he was like, do not give a fuck about what people think about you because nobody
Mhm.
is thinking about you the way that you are thinking about you.
Mm.
You know? And
Mhm.
I think that was one of my first like revelations that why am I so concerned with how everybody sees me when
Mhm.
like no one really sees me that like what did he say? I think he was the start of how I started to like stand up for myself. Like he was the very like first thing that taught me how to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, someone recalled like in senior year where like, oh yeah, like I was really they were telling their this was like a popular really popular girl and she was like telling her friends that this somehow got back to me
Yeah.
of like, yeah, holy shit, like I said something and like Deborah like disagreed with me, like vocally disagreed with me. And that's like a big deal apparently,
Yeah.
me disagreeing with people, which
Yeah, yeah.
for now is like no one blinks when I disagree with them.
Right,
Like
right.
um uh yeah, so that was like I mean cuz I used to hyperventilate like when I would
Mm.
raise my hand. I used to
Yeah.
cry when I had to talk in front of class and
Yeah.
I was a very shy and quiet person
Yeah.
and now I'm like a loud animal. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really hard for people to see that I was once that person because like that was like drama queen was the start of it all.
Yeah.
Where I felt like I could truly stand up for myself.
Yeah.
So it's just a
Yeah.
shame that that fell apart.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, Drama Quinn was also like an angelic influence on you in that regard, helping you uh grasp your voice, right? Like
Yeah,
helping
he
little
really
Deb
was.
grasp their voice. Yeah, I thought that was, like, really great because at that age, like, we do need, like, supporters, like, little people who say, like, "It's okay." And it's interesting how your parents needed the same thing. They needed an authority figure to say, "Yeah, like, Deb
Mm.
can go and do art." And it's like, in what ways, like, were our parents' children like that, you know? Like, I mean, Deb also talks
Oh.
about it in therapy, like, she's like, "Well, my mom is so immature, she's like a child." And it's like, well, I mean, aren't all immigrants children because they're, perpetually stuck in a certain state when they were treated like an equal? They were treated like,
You
because
mean
for instance, like,
are you saying yeah.
Deb's
I was
mom
gonna
was
say I was
sorry?
gonna say, like, do you mean that they're in limbo?
They're in limbo, exactly. Yeah,
Sorry, you can
actually, that's
continue, I
great.
totally
That's perfect because, I was like, "Well, how did you come to that I wanted to ask you that too. But, yeah, like, they are stuck in that place, in that certain past, and it's not s they're not stuck there because of any fault of their own. They're stuck there
mm-mm.
because America doesn't treat them as an equal. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, a lot of, like, when I went to college, like, I saw quite a few Koreans who already had college degrees in Korea at
Oh,
excellent
wow.
universities in Seoul, but they would, move to the States, and then they would have to go to college again in their mid-20s, and because their
Oh,
degree in South Korea was not recognized here in America. And I wonder if, like, maybe, Deb's mom, because, she studied at Ihwade, which is a great university where she
oh,
was a
yeah.
librarian, and librarians in Korea make good money. I know this because
Is that true? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
my maternal aunt is a librarian, and she makes a pretty good living and, is very comfortable with her life. And librarians are respected. They're kind of respected like, like a teacher in a way. So, it's like to not have that part of you recognized in this country and to be treated in that way does make one feel as if they need to go and seek permission from authority figures forever, right? Like in Deb's case, like in your case, it's like, oh, you found your voice and you're like, oh, now I am my own boss. But for
Yeah.
Koreans, I think when they're always in this perpetually in this state of like, I don't know the language as well, I don't know the system as well, I'm not treated like an equal here, then they will always feel like a child in a way, like a little
Mhm.
kid. So it's like an interesting parallel I'm seeing between your character and your parents' characters in the book. Yeah.
Damn, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, luckily there were more people after my, violin teacher who were, like, authority figures that were like, "No, Deb can do this." Like,
Mm.
they have the ability to. They have the I hesitate to call this, like, talent or whatever, like, they have the brain to do this, and, like, they actually like it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. They
and
like it.
yeah,
The most
I
important
like it.
part.
Yeah, I actually enjoy I do, like, still do you ever, like, did you have to play, like, a classical instrument growing up? Like
Uh,
piano or
I
violin
mean,
or
piano,
something?
yeah, flute, yeah, but I never excelled at either of them, so it was just, like, a bit of a
Yeah.
waste. Yeah.
Do you I wish I can play the piano and violin again, but,
Mm.
now
Mhm.
that's, like, I wanna do it for fun, like, I wanna do it because
Yeah,
I want to. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
like, I would love to take piano lessons again or, like, something like, I don't know, I wanna do stuff, um,
Yeah.
that no one is putting, like, a metaphorical gun to my head to do it, but it's like,
Exactly.
just do it because you want
Exactly.
to. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. Have you
yeah.
seen that show Beef yet? It's on Netflix.
Oh, I
It's
keep hearing about it. What did
yeah.
you think?
I think it's one of the best shows ever. Like, one
Really?
of the
Okay.
I
I
think it's one of the in terms of, like, a Korean American, like, show influence, I think this is the best one there ever was in America, in American
Wow.
history. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dude, what the Koreans are just, like, taking over, man. What
Well, I
else
mean,
was
the
I
Koreans were always taking over, but it's another level when it's the Korean Americans, because the Korean
That's
Americans never
true.
had a time to shine ever in this country, ever, 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 ever.
Korean Americans are truly, like, a different breed from Koreans. Like, it's just like, that's why
100%.
at Carnegie Mellon, there's a KSA and there's a KASA. Casa
Yeah.
and Kasa.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
It's just we're just very different.
Very different.
There's like a whole it's like a third I mean, people call it a third culture, but it really
Oh,
is.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's a way that Korean or Asian Americans talk, like their accents, and it's
Uh-huh.
not because it's not like a there's no like accent just because they speak a different language, but like an accent of like the way it's not a dialect, but it's the way that they enunciate their words, Asian
Yeah,
Americans,
yeah.
that I can hear them from across the room from behind me, and I'm like, I know that's an Asian American behind me from
Right.
SoCal.
Totally.
Like I can tell.
Totally.
Um
Totally.
yeah, what yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but something what were we talking about? We were talking about
Talking
violin, yeah,
about
piano,
violin
violin, etc.
and beef a little bit.
Oh,
But
beef, yes. Trying to finish Succession because I need to
oh
catch
yeah,
up on it.
Succession, another great show. Another great show.
Ugh,
But yeah, I
ugh.
was like very proud of like Lee Sung-jin sort of representing Korean Americans with beef because I'm like, this is a whole nother story. It's not, and it doesn't get told in this way. It's always told it from like a perpetual immigrant standpoint, and this doesn't do that. So
You really they just have okay.
I really
They just happen
appreciated
to
it.
be Asian American.
Exactly. I'm like, finally,
Interesting.
finally, finally, finally a show that does this. Because before, they never did it. They never, ever, ever even tried to do it. And now it's happening. And I'm like, so happy that it's out there. Um,
Can
I,
I
yeah,
yeah. I just want to say like future projects that I want to make are not just projects that's about like anti-imperialism, anti-military because I think there's not a lot of I haven't seen a lot of books that's like less about the diaspora and more about like the effects that like Korea had to go through from like war and occupation and stuff. Like I really want to like do that kind of project one day. But also
yeah.
make projects where it's like the characters just happen to be Asian. Like it's fine. Like
Yes.
and there's no like trauma, there's no
Uh-huh.
like I also want to I want to make like different kinds of stories where it's like let's talk about Koreans like that are just like in a really weird like fantasy world. Like what does that
Yeah.
look like? I also want to
Yeah.
make there's a story I have in mind where it's like a sci-fi story but like the main character is Korean
Uh-huh.
but like they're also trans. Like
Yeah.
like I the trans
Yes.
community for Koreans is like
Mm-hmm.
abysmally low. Like I don't like I was like googling on YouTube I was YouTube searching like
Mm-hmm.
transition process like Asian like Asian person or
Okay.
Asian trans like transitioning process. And like
Mm-hmm.
the videos I saw were like they only have like 1,000 views, which is like
Mm.
crazy to me. It's like we
Mm.
need more of this,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, Korea has a I mean, Korea's relationship with the queer community is difficult, but in other ways it's like in weird spurts they're highly progressive. Like Harisu is like,
Really?
an actress and singer and she's a trans woman and
No
she
way.
was yeah, she's been around since the 90s and she's
What?
accepted as a celebrity. Yeah, girl, get to know them. Oh, I'm sorry. You go by they them
Yeah,
theirs,
I
right?
do
Sorry
I
about
am a
that.
they them. No, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Um,
That's fun. That's hilarious. Yeah.
but yeah,
Wow.
like Harisu's huge in Korea in the culture and she's recognized as a woman and
How do you
um
spell what Hari?
Harisu. Harisu. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, Harisu. Okay, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like you could start with her and and
Wow. Sorry.
there's a lot written about
Okay.
the Korean queer community, like, in academia. I could, like, send you articles. Like, I've
Oh,
written
please,
one
can you
for
send that
sure, like,
can you send them to
So, yeah,
me?
I could send those to you. But, yeah, like, let's get back to your book, and then,
Yeah.
we can wrap because I don't wanna eat up too much of your time.
I do
Um
have therapy at noon.
okay, so we should really wrap up, like, in the next 3 minutes then.
Ye
Okay, then let's just talk about your heroes then. Like, who are your graphic novel
Yeah.
heroes?
Oh my
And
god.
yeah, and next project
So
stuff, if anything.
yeah, let's see. Do you know the book? This is Yeonsik Hung, but Umma's Table is also really good.
Okay.
It's like it's pretty much like bio. It's definitely auto bio, but
Uh,
like it's about like it's translated from Korean.
great.
Um, these are not graphic novels, but like Brian Selznick, who wrote Hugo Cabret, is also
Mhm.
like one of my first inspirations to draw in the style that I do draw currently for the
Mm.
book.
Mm.
It's all like black and white, like pencil graphite, and like it's like a thick book, and it's just half of it is just drawings, half of it is text, and I think I want to make stuff like that.
Yeah.
Who else? The Arrival by Sean Tan is also another really good book.
Oh,
It's like pretty much a graphic novel.
I love that film that it's based on,
Oh no no
right?
no! It's no, The
No?
Arrival. There's the sci-fi film, and there's like
Oh,
fantasy immigrant
got it,
story.
got it. Because
Uh,
I think The
The
Arrival was
Arrival.
also written by an Asian American writer, the short story that it's
Oh,
based on. Yeah, yeah.
that's so
Okay,
funny.
okay,
Um, okay, yeah, but The Arrival by Sean Tan, who also
okay.
blurbed the book, which I was
I
like,
saw. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
that
huge
was
one.
crazy.
Big
It's a
name.
huge,
Very
big
impressive.
name.
Yeah.
Um, who else? Inyo Asano, who wrote Goodnight Punpun, some
Okay,
manga.
okay.
I have a tattoo of it. But
Oh,
it's like his
nice.
work is like deeply fucked up, and like every trigger warning you can think of is in there. Um, this is actually a really good friend of mine, but Rosemary Valero O'Connell,
Okay.
who did this.
Oh, it's
Don't Go
pretty.
Without Me.
Oh, I
And
love that.
she also illustrated Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, which is another graphic novel. But Rosemary is like one of the most like she's like a golden child and also a very good person, and I adore her. Um,
I
but yeah,
love
it's really
that.
cute because I feel like Rosemary and I have this relationship where we're like I use you as my inspiration, and she's like it's like really sweet because
Yeah,
I had her books on my table while I was working on In Limbo, and she was
yeah,
telling me after Limbo came out, it's like I need to keep this book on my desk so I can like
yeah,
study it, and I was like
yeah. I love that.
ah.
And
Yeah, so those are my
I loved your book too. It was so beautifully
thank
illustrated,
you.
and um yeah, I'm excited to see like what other works you're gonna cook up because yeah, you're very talented and I love the kind of specific like themes that you put your focus on, which I think easily get overlooked, but they're
Yeah,
significant and worthy of attention. So yeah, thank you
really
for
appreciate that.
making this wonderful book and thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure
Thank you
talking
so
with
much for
you.
having me.